therapist was like, well, what do you radically accept? And I was like, I radically accept that I'm dead and I'm trying to find my way to heaven, and that's it. And she was like, that's not what we're talking about here. But that was like really my thought process because I've never been alive before. And so for me, the contrast of how I was living, I thought that that was life. And so the opposite must be death, right? Miracles, it refers like with gender, like it says him and stuff. I use they, or I say source or the universe. Like those words just seem like they fit a little bit better. I don't mind the gendering in the course. Like I understand why it is the way that it is. Um, so yeah, like I just kept using, I became the abuser in people's lives. I said, oh, I'm not going to be a victim anymore. I'm going to be the perpetrator. Like I will no longer let bad things happen to me. Instead, I will make bad things happen to other people. I will push every person out of my life. Anybody who thinks that they want to be in my life, I'll let them in for a minute and then I'll push them away. And I did that and I caused so much harm. I really did, just like mountains and mountains of harm to myself, to other people, to my sister. I abandoned her, like after our parents died, I just said like, oh, I can't deal. And I just left. And she was only 18 when they died. I was 23. And like so again, my life just became drugs, immersed in all of that. And then I had this very profound spiritual awakening. My journey like into spiritual awakening, somebody had maliciously overdosed me with psychedelics. Like I said, I caused a lot of harm, right? Like I did a lot of bad things to a lot of people. And this one man decided that he was going to get back at me. And so he spiked a drink that I had with like 300 hits of LSD. I didn't know that. I just drank the drink because it was my drink, And I took a sip of it and like my brain cracked open. I went into outer space and I was completely like unconscious for 10 days. But like in my mind, 3 months had gone by. It was like this huge, and I was in a totally different world. Everything was turquoise. It was like, yeah, but my body was physically here. Anyway, that was kind of like the beginning of the cracking open of my spirit. Like something cracked open in my ego and was like allowing little pieces of spirit in. I started experiencing synchronicities, angel numbers came into my awareness, like all of these really loud signs that I just kept medicating myself and sedating myself and like trying to push them away. And then the culmination of all of it was that I had this very profound spiritual awakening. It's called a Kundalini awakening. I have some language for it today. And Kundalini energy is an Eastern term. It just means life force. Like in the Western world, we would call it receiving the Holy Spirit, and lots of other cultures have different names for it. But basically, what happened was my spirit came alive. It woke up in this one moment. It had been asleep my entire life, and in one instant, it decided like, okay, the alarm's going off. Like, let's do this. And this rush of energy was going up and down every single one of my chakra systems, and it was actually causing me to pee all over myself. So half of my awakening was spent on the toilet, which is kind of a funny, a little funny like thing altogether. And in that moment of having this awakening, when my third eye and my crown opened up, I went into eternity. And like for the contrast, when I entered the space of eternity, I was a homeless meth head prostitute strung out on heroin. I was an atheist. I was an orphan to suicide. I was a liar, a manipulator, a thief. I was a racist. I was a rapist. I was all the things that you would think wouldn't get you into heaven. And there I was, enveloped in unconditional love. And it was as if my human life had never even happened. It really felt like I woke up from a dream and I couldn't even remember any of my human life. It was 35 years of life at that point in time. The only thing that I could remember was that my parents had committed suicide. And I remember just kind of like shaking it off, like, whoa, what a weird dream. And in my experience, it was like a near death like experience. I didn't actually physically die, but in that experience, they took me through my pre-birth planning, and they showed me that I as a soul had chosen everything that's ever happened to me in my life. And I was like, yeah, right. First of all, I was so pissed to get to heaven. I was like, I can't believe that I'm wrong. This is crazy. I'm probably the only spirit to make it there and actually be upset. And then when they told me that I had chosen everything in my life, I was like, there's no way. And like all of these sort of thoughts were coming back from the human life. And I thought about the man that molested me as a small child. I'm like, there's no way that I would have picked that. And then they took me through the actual planning process. And yeah, if you watch the video, it looked like a grocery store. I was like pulling all these boxes off of these things, but I was seeing the moment that I and another soul were coming into contract with one another and the reasons why. And so, like the man who molested me as a small child, we were balancing our lives together. And in a previous life, I had been his abuser. And so we go back and forth, kind of experiencing these things together because it's for the evolvement of my soul. My human cannot comprehend how that could evolve my soul. But, like I feel like heaven's probably really boring. And we're like, let's go experience some weird stuff. Come on, it's only for a minute. So yeah, like that's like the bulk of my experience. So being downloaded with my pre-birth plan really like set me up with like I had 2 tons of bondage released from me. And I was no longer a victim to my circumstance. I was actually a divine co-creator of my experience. And that was so much freedom for me because like so many things had happened to me in my life that I thought, man, and then I realized, oh, okay, I'm actually a script writer. Like I have written a book of my life. My script writer is obviously like, she's into Spanish novellas. She wants like every experience to happen all at once. And it's a very like it's a script that has a lot of depth and a lot of contrast. And so, after my experience, like I just wrote it off as drug-induced psychosis. Like this was not part of my life. And I just went about my life still using, still manipulating, still stealing and thieving and then, yeah, the universe stepped in a way that I cannot, just these beautiful divine synchronicities. And if you were able to watch the video, you've heard some of them. Like I found myself into 12-step fellowship, like through divine synchronicity into a long-term rehab. And, like I knew that something really profound had happened to me. And I knew I had like so much faith. I mean, number one, I thought that I was dead. I was like, oh, okay, I died. And like, this is it. Now I'm dead. And I kept asking like strangers on the street. I'm like, how do I get out of here? Like, what do you do? Like, how do you go to the next level? Like, what is it? And I remember I kept like riding random elevators thinking that I would eventually step into the elevator that would like transport me to the next dimension. And I would talk to people in the elevator and they had no idea what I was talking about, obviously. But I kept, I had so much faith. And I just thought like, okay, I'm dead. That's okay. I can deal with this, like I know that I have guidance. I could feel all of these spirit guides around me. I had such intense connection to the other side. And then, and then I found my way into the literature that was going to help me on my journey. And I found A Course in Miracles. I didn't find the course itself right away. I found Gabrielle Bernstein's book, The Universe Has Your Back. And I thought that Gabrielle Bernstein wrote the course because she kept referencing it in her book. And so, I lived in a rehab for a year and a half. I was in a long-term treatment facility. So like I didn't have access to the internet or a cell phone, but once a week they'd let us go to the library. And so I kept like looking up Gabrielle Bernstein, A Course in Miracles, and like nothing would come up. And I'm like, oh my God, like how am I ever going to find this? Like, what is it? Like, why won't the universe let me find it? And then I looked at the little section for spirituality in the library, which is like where I lived every time they'd let us go there. And this book stood out to me, and it said A Course in Miracles Made Easy by Alan Cohen. And I got that book. It was like sticking off the shelf a little bit, so that I could really notice it. And I devoured it. I read it in one day. I just didn't sleep. I just read the book all day long. And I loved everything that I was saying. And I was like, oh my God, this guy gets it. He's dead too. He knows we're all dead. That was really what my thought process was. I went into therapy. Like we had this group about radical acceptance. And the therapist was like, well, what do you radically accept? And I was like, I radically accept that I'm dead and I'm trying to find my way to heaven. And that's it. And she was like, that's not what we're talking about here. But that was like really my thought process because I've never been alive before. And so for me, the contrast of how I was living, I thought that that was life. And so the opposite must be death, right? But like really, it was that I was dead before and now I'm truly alive. And in the St. Francis of Assisi prayer, it says, we awake to eternal life through death. And that's what it felt like to me. I was taking it real literally though. So when I finally got my hands on the actual course, I said, oh my goodness, this is a handbook for the recently deceased. That's awesome. Just like in the movie Beetlejuice. I can't understand anything this book is saying. I need like my caseworker Juno to come over here and help me figure it out. But I just kept reading, you know, like, and I really enjoyed the beginning of the text. And then somewhere around the middle, I was like, I'm reading where I have no idea what I'm reading, but I'm just going to keep going. And I had like a very strict routine. I did a lesson a day. Still living in the rehab this whole time. I actually used to scribe out each lesson after I read it because I had nothing to do all day for like hours and hours. And then the pandemic happened, so I was like basically rewriting the course in my own handwriting just to really integrate, especially those first, you know, like couple dozen lessons. They're like, for me, it was so important to recognize that like I really don't know what anything is for. And yeah, you know, I shared this story with Maria. Maybe I shared it on the live, but when I finished reading the course, I really thought that I was going to ascend. I thought, okay, this is it. I did all the homework. I'm finished. Like, I know this stuff. I've integrated it. I'm going home. And, you know, like I got to the last paragraph. I laid back in my bunk bed. Yes, I lived in a bunk bed for a year and a half. I took off my shoes. I read the last paragraph. Nothing happened. But I had a lot more information, you know. And then when I left treatment, I found a Course in Miracles study group, and I went to a bunch of them at first because it felt like my passion, like, you know, it was like so important to me. And I went to some weird ones, and I went to some good ones, and I've been with one group for, it's been almost 3 years now, 2.5 years that I've been going to that group. And yeah, you know, like it's so beautiful to be able to connect with people around this literature and talk about how we understand it. And you know, like in the
And
course,
Betty, how come you connected with it so much?
it
Like,
just
what
it
what was it? What was it that really like was like wow? Like being that you had that your experience, right?
yeah, I think the thing that really stood out for me, well, I mean, there's so many things. Obviously, like the lesson that you know that this talk is based around, I'm not a victim of the world I see. Like that was so huge for me because I really loved my victim mentality. Like it was the only version of myself that I had ever known. And this book was telling me that I did not have to live that way anymore if I didn't want to. And when I read the course and I think about sort of, you know, the dream, I know that this is a dream. I know it. I know it. Like this is a knowing, it's not a belief. Especially because in my experience it felt like I had woken up from a dream and my life was a nightmare. You know, my life was truly a nightmare. It was hell. And this is my happy dream. And so again, the book telling me that like I'm the hero of the dream, that I can transform, you know, my perception at any given moment. And it also talks in the course about the final judgment. You know, like there is no condemnation. There is no judgment the way that my brain hears the word judgment. The only judgment is grace. And like I shared, the contrast of my life, if I was bestowed with grace, literally anybody will be. I mean, like anybody. There's just like no words to describe to you what kind of animal I was before, but it's just not this person who's sitting here today. And that's incredible. And the course validates all of that for me. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, the part that you said about the molester part and being in the grocery store and like being shown that connection that you had to, okay, this is what we're gonna do, or have that kind of still blows my mind in a way. I feel like it's hard to understand it in as a human in form, because it's like, again, it goes back to, and I asked you this in Instagram, but I think this is a very important point, because these are things in life that happen to us that appear very, very bad, and we make them very, very real, and we suffer a lot. So I feel that that's, when you said on Instagram, it was also very powerful of like, why would we create that molestation, right? Why would we create this narrative in our lives? And the way that you say it is helpful. It's like it really brings me hope in a sense. So can you just dive into that a little bit, because I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Like I was also molested when I was I think 3 or 4 years old, and I get that, but I guess I can't, my human brain can't wrap around why I would have created an ectopic pregnancy in my life. Or do you know what I'm saying? So I'm just curious, because this is
yeah.
like powerful. That right there is like,
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And like the thing with that, the concept of pre-birth planning is about really climbing out of that victim mentality. And in the course too, the course tells us that God doesn't even know that we're here, right? That's what it says in the
Yeah.
course. So that's another reason why I feel like, of course, we must have designed these totally insane, wacky lives, like because God never would. So
That's
like
so
that's
true.
another thing that rings very true to me in the course as well, is that of course God doesn't know that I'm here, because like none of this is grace. Like this is all just experience. And it's only my ego that puts a connotation on it. My ego decides positive and negative. My spirit has literally no conception of what positive and negative is. It only knows experience, growth, and expansion. But
Mhm.
my ego is like, this is good, this is bad, that looks pretty, that looks ugly. Like my ego can separate anything and pick it apart. So, so some of the literature that really helped me with digesting the concept of pre-birth planning, Robert Schwartz, he's written a bunch of books about pre-birth planning. One of his books is called Your Soul's Gift, and it talks about people who choose souls who choose very adverse conditions. So, miscarriage and abortion is one of the chapters, suicide, mental illness, rape, incest, like these things that we can't comprehend as humans. Why would somebody pick that? Why would somebody write their script that way? So, what he does is he regresses people back in between lives to when we go back. It's sort of as like a school, like where we sign up for different lessons. We like pick our college courses. Like, I want to do this major in this lifetime, and with this person as my lab partner. And so he's regressed thousands of people back in between lives, and he's
But what's cool is too that I'm seeing, Betty, that is actually what we choose is good.
yes,
That's what
well,
blows my mind. It's not that it's good, like, but it is actually good because it's perfect for our soul, like, and for the whole. So that blows my mind. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? Like, it's not, we see it as a bad thing. I'm trying to wrap my head around that. It's actually not bad. It's part of it. It's in some crazy way. You know what I mean?
There's a little prayer in the course, and I just opened it like up the book to a random page the other day, and it stood out to me, and this has helped me so much whenever I'm going through like a moment of pure desperation, grief, strife, like whatever it is. I can generally open up the course to a random page and it speaks to me, and I always open it up to this same prayer. It's like it's eerie, it's so creepy. But I am responsible for what I see. I choose the feelings I experience, and I decide upon the goal I would achieve. And everything that seems to happen to me, I ask for and receive as I have asked. And
Holy
again,
shit.
this for me, this ties into the pre-birth planning so much. Like the experience that I am having, I have asked for. Why? I have no idea. And I can surrender it. I don't have to know why in the moment. I mean, like, I want to. I want to be right more than I want to be happy. All the time, I want to be right. But if I can just let go and surrender and recognize that I have chosen this, I have chosen everything that I experience, my life gets so much freer.
Mm-hmm. Also, there's like no, there's none. It's like also, it's a relief too, because we're not a victim of it. Going back to the topic of the month, right? We're not a victim of the world that we see. So that's powerful. Shauna says, if someone passes away at a young age, how do you view that fitting into their plan? Do they take the experience into their next life?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, because there's some things that are just like unfathomable, right? Like, why
But
would a
it's all
baby?
the same though, right? It doesn't matter what it is. Mhm.
Well, and there's certain reasons why certain souls choose certain things. And again, we can't see them because like we're here in human form. We really can't comprehend it. But that's where trust and faith really comes in. So like, let's say like a small child dies, right? Which is tragic. I mean, it's tragic to our ego, especially. Now, when you think about death, that spirit got to go to that baby got to go to heaven. That small child is in heaven right now. Like that's awesome. But but we're grieving, like we grieve the loss of something so small, we feel like it didn't reach its potential, but its soul did reach its potential in this lifetime. That was its purpose. Why? Maybe because in a previous life that small child's mother died as like a small child. It could be like a reverse situation where they're balancing lifetimes. But like that's the thing about grief and loss, like it affects, I'll talk about myself, it affects me so greatly because I miss that person's form. But when I think about death, like that person is in heaven. Like, oh my God, how jealous could I possibly be that you're like chilling in heaven with your creator? That's awesome. But I definitely understand how some things seem unthinkable. Like even, like big tragedies like the Holocaust, or, like even things like racial injustice, like the things that go on in our collective. I can't comprehend why a soul would want to do that. But I do have every ounce of faith that it is happening for some divine reason,
Mhm.
like that groups of souls sign up for things on a collective experience that they want to have with each other.
Mhm.
And that's why those things happen. And that living in that mentality for me gives me freedom in the experience. And plus it's an illusion, like none of it is real. I mean, a small child dies, like that's tragic, but also it's not real.
I
Not to
love
discount a person's grief.
there's a really great story of Byron Katie and her daughter. And I don't know if you know the teacher Byron Katie, she's incredible. Um, I think she's very awake living in the world, but she was with her daughter, and her mom had passed away like a few months earlier, like I don't know, a little bit before that. And these people asked, "Hey Byron, how are you?" And the daughter, and then they said to her, how's your mom doing? And then Byron Katie says, "She's great, she's dead." Like just like that. And then the daughter's like, "What?" And then the people were stunned, like stunned. And then they went away. And then the daughter said to Byron, "Mom, you can't talk to people like that. They don't understand it." I get goosebumps just saying it because that's it. Like she has no judgment. She says, "Of course, I want my mom, I want my mom to be where she wants to be. And it's
Mm,
selfish to want her to be here. It's selfish. It's like, oh, please stay alive for me." Do you know what I mean? So it's like this upside down love. So that's not love actually when you want somebody to stay alive for you because you want to be okay. So I don't know. I think that was super cool when she said that.
I love that. Yeah. And it's not like to discount someone's grief.
Yeah.
Obviously, if a parent has just lost a child, you're not like, hey, guess what? This is an illusion. Chill out. Like, no, of
No,
course.
absolutely
We're
not. No,
human.
no.
We're here to experience a whole range of emotions. But like at my core, these beliefs really help me, like even with situations that I've encountered since my spiritual awakening, like family members passing away, or like there's so much unrest in the collective, and you see that how it affects different kinds of people. Or I work in the recovery field, so I deal with a lot of addiction. I've dealt with lots of clients transitioning over, and like I just have to just turn it over to God, like it's not always an easy thing to do because I really want to hang on to my resentment and my power and my control. But if I can turn it over, my life gets a lot easier.
Pamela asks, she's actually at work now. She's not here, but she'll watch the replay. It says, my experience was nanosecond glimpse of the truth after reading The Disappearance of the Universe, which is a book by Gary Renard, which led to ACIM for me. She put, it was a flash of remembering God, which resulted in 2 days of crying afterwards. I have never had another one, and I am guided on this journey with faith. Can you share your understanding of faith for those of us who haven't experienced what you have?
Wow. Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I mean, like, yeah, a nanosecond of remembrance is such a beautiful thing. And, for me, um, my experience, it fades more and more. Like the feeling of it, like the story of it remains because I say it over and over again. And I've written it down about 1,000 times over and over again right after it happened, trying to make sense of it. But that's where faith comes in, which is exactly what she's saying. And for me, the experience with faith, I like to test my faith often. I'm like, you know what, God, why don't you just like let me know that you're still around? Because like I'm not, just because I had some kind of profound spiritual experience does not mean that like I live every second of my life in spiritual awareness. I'm a human. I'll use it as an excuse for as long as my ego wants me to. And but walking in faith, like I also the Course in Miracles, the workbook lessons have really established such a strong foundation of faith for me. So, and I also work the 12 steps. I'm in a 12-step program. And some people say that A Course in Miracles is the graduate work to the 12 steps. And I did it backwards. I did the course first, and now I'm working the steps. But that also really solidifies my foundation, because some of the principles, it's just about following spiritual principles, but some of the really important spiritual principles in the 12 steps are honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And so for me, that's where all of my faith comes in, like this willingness to surrender, to just hand it over to something bigger than myself. And again, like for me, like knowing that the script is written is really an important part of my faith as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that concept that you were talking about earlier of like sometimes you don't know why, or you're not gonna know why. Just like me, for instance, with my ectopic pregnancy, for me, I got to the point of I don't even need to know why. I don't understand why. I know that there's a purpose for it, and there's like this comfort and peace within me, and I don't need to know why it happened, when like that kind of thing. Even my molestation too. It's just it, and the reason I asked you that's because I feel like it's hard for people to understand that and to get to that place. But the way that you describe it with the, that interaction you had, that you created that soul contract is huge. Because when you know that, you're like, oh my God, I'm not a victim of anything. I'm not a victim of my circumstance. So I thought that was really cool. And the whole thing also is like, you're not going to understand a lot of things. It's like, you're not that's why the first lessons is like, I don't know what anything means. It's just really being very innocent in your approach to life and just filled with wonder about it. I want to open up the floor to some questions if anyone has any questions. This is juicy. It's juicy. And you better take advantage of Betty that she's here in a good way. Oh, Shauna has a question. Perfect. So it says, since your experience and what you've read, studied in ACIM, what are your beliefs now on the purpose of our current life, and what would be helpful to focus on within this life? And it's on the
Wow.
chat if you want to read it.
Yes, I see it. Yeah, that's just like a regular, no big deal question. The purpose of our current life. Okay, well, and I don't know how much of this aligns with the course. Like the course is such a huge tool in my life. I also have other tools and belief systems that guide me on my journey as well. But I believe that we are here for the Great Awakening. I believe that there's a shift in consciousness taking place. I don't think that I would have been awoken otherwise. I know that something is happening on a global scale, because this was not part of like my picture. It was not going to happen. And it was also part of my spiritual experience.